don't talk feature function, right? Just don't go and say, well, my product does this, my product does that, my product,
Mhm.
nobody cares. The only thing people care about is what your product can do for them.
All right, cool. Well, Mark, welcome to the show, man. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Will. It's good to be talking to you again.
Yeah, likewise. So most folks that are listening don't know, but Mark and I go way back. When I
Yeah,
was running my company, LiveNinja, this was around 2014. We had just pivoted from a B2C model to a
right.
B2B model. We had just raised funding, and in B2B, you have to kind of build out your sales force and learn a whole different level of sales methodology and sales tactics that when you're dealing with consumer, you don't really have to know. And we didn't really know anything, and we didn't know what we were doing whatsoever. So we started working with Mark, who came in and really coached us from the ground up on how to be a sales force, how to talk to customers, what a sales cycle is, how to follow
Yeah.
up, get objections from
Forecasting.
forecasting, all these things
Yeah,
that were just so valuable. And I think it was at the time was just me and Miles were the entire
yeah,
sales force, right?
yeah, yeah.
Shout out to Miles,
Shout out to
amazing,
Miles.
yeah, amazing guy
He's
who's
doing
now running
great.
his own company. Yeah,
He's doing awesome. Glad to see that.
yeah. So I want to get into all this stuff around sales, such an important
Okay.
concept for most startups.
Yeah.
But first, before we get into that, quick background and upbringing, just let the listeners know a little bit about you and your background, and then how you got into sales.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Florida, not Miami. So I'm from Titusville, which, in case you're not familiar with that, it's right up by Cape Canaveral. My dad's family's been in Florida for probably 200 years. My mom immigrated to the U.S. when she was 23 by herself. So I grew up in Titusville. I left Florida when I was 18. I thought, probably never going to come back. Went up to the Northeast for school, went overseas, came back, spent a few months in Miami, 2001, 2002, looking for a job, studying for the GMAT, working at Biscayne National Park, then got into business school, went up to New York, spent a lot of time in New York. And then in 2010, I decided, for personal reasons, my father had passed away, my mom, my sister were still here. I said, I got to be closer to them. And they were in Central Florida. So I said, I'm going back to Florida uh, after 19 years. And I moved to Miami, and great move, different time, 2010 than it is now. I married a Miami girl. I live 5 miles from my Latin mother-in-law, which is the legal limit. I'm understood. Literally, if there's a house 2 blocks further south, I don't think I could move. I am 5 miles from my mother-in-law, who's a saint. In case she's watching it, I love my mother-in-law. I do.
Yeah.
I won the mother-in-law lottery, but I'm not going anywhere, and which is great. I love Miami. My mom, my sister in Central Florida. I'm back in my home state. So it's been good. It's been great. I spent a lot of time out of Florida, and we were talking about Rebecca Donta from Miami Angels, and she mentioned she moved to New York, and it took that, almost takes that to realize, to sort of realize what you got. And
Yep.
I think leaving Florida and then seeing it from, it just makes you realize what you got. And so I intentionally came back. I consciously came back, and it's great, right? It's great. So here I am.
That's awesome, man. And how did you get into sales? Like, what was the kind of the transition into the sales career, and then ultimately at your job at SAP?
Yeah, so I was a liberal arts major, uh,
So was I.
international. Yeah,
Yeah,
so yeah, so they're not
communications
exactly
and liberal
lining.
arts.
Oh, there you go. So they're not exactly lining up at the door,
No.
with job offers,
Listen,
right?
liberal arts is the major you pick when you don't know what else you're doing, right?
All right, so within that, I was
Yeah.
international relations and German major. Okay, so all of my buds and all the guys in engineering, they had these jobs lined up,
And
right?
by the way, I'll speak for myself when I say I don't know
Yeah.
what I were doing. Maybe you definitely did know
No,
what you were
no.
doing when you picked liberal
What
arts.
No, so so within liberal arts, I had international
Yep.
relations in German. Then I picked up Spanish
Yep.
along the way. And so I'm coming out of school. I'm calling all these alums. And back in the day, it was books, like physical books, right? And you looked up alums in the books, and you called them. And I'm like, hi, I'm Mark. Long story short, I get into a software division of Thomson Reuters, right? And my first job's on a help desk, and answering the phone. Software is broken, fix it, and they hired me because I spoke a little bit of Spanish, which was
Hmm.
not really good. And so it got to the point where anybody calling from Latin America came to me. So, it was great. after a little bit of time answering phone, I had one product. The guy said, "Look, we have one product. Learn it." I did. And then they pulled me into the Latin American sales guy said, "Look, I need somebody who understands the product." He pulled me into a sales engineering, pre-sales role, working with the sales,
Hmm.
as a demo guy, right? Make it work.
Yep.
So they would just take me and drop me somewhere in Latin America, 2 weeks in Buenos Aires, a week in Mexico. They're like, here's Mark. He's your demo guy for a week. POCs, proof of concepts, make it work. I was 23, 24. I was having, it was great, right? Dropped me for 2 weeks in Buenos Aires. Okay.
Hmm.
And I was working with the financial services, and they just make the software work and show it how it does this. And so when they decided to open offices down there, they hired a Mexican guy in Mexico City, a Brazilian guy in Sao Paulo, and they sent me to Buenos Aires. They said, "You're the sales guy for Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. Here's a phone." Put me in an office of a subsidiary, set me down there. I was the only American in the office, and they said, "Good luck." And I had, 3 days of sales training from Millerheim, and I had a phone, and everybody who picked up the phone spoke Spanish, and there I was. So, that's how I got into sales. I was
Got thrown right
selling,
into it.
got thrown right into it, right?
Yeah.
I'm not recommending that.
Right.
I'm not recommending that, but yeah, and thank God there was a guy who's a good friend of mine now, Diego, and he sat around the corner for me, and I think he heard me saying so many dumb things that he took pity on me. He came around, I was like, "No, you can't say," and I just I listened to it. It was like an apprenticeship model, but he was sitting there. I'd listen to him. I'd hear him doing. I was like, "Okay, how do you do that? Objection handling, you just pick it up." And so yeah, that's how I got into it. I sold Southern Cone, and then the other two guys didn't sell, and they said, "Congratulations, you're promoted. You're selling all of Latin America now, right?" Because I had sold a couple deals. So yeah, I was 25, and that's how I got into sales, man.
That's amazing. Did you love it right away, or did it take some warming up to say like, okay, this is what I want to do with my career?
Um, I like people. I like customers. Uh, I love being in front of customers. I think, the customers, by the way, are people, right?
Right.
Just, I mean, because people get, "Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I'm talking to the CTO." No, you're talking to a guy named Bill, probably, who's got a wife and kids and a mortgage, so they're people, just like you can talk to them about football or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I love customers. I love talking to people. I like solving problems. And I think, if you like talking to people, you like dealing with customers, you like helping customers, and you like solving problems, yeah, sales is a great career, I think. Yeah.
That's a great point. Like what you said, a lot of times we get a little bit nervous or we work ourselves up. Hey, this is a potential customer. We got
Yeah.
to, say the right things. We got to close this deal. This is a human being that you're talking to. I think I remember from your trainings, back in LiveNinja, you're like, how can you save this guy 30 minutes so he can go pick up his kids
Right.
earlier, right?
Right. You're
These are
right.
things you kind of got to think about when you put yourself in the position of a prospect. This is not
Absolutely.
someone you're trying to sell. You're trying to solve their problem, make their life better, right?
Yeah. You have to remember that people are multifaceted, right?
Mhm.
People have professional lives and they have personal lives, right? And so I think, when people first get into sales or customer, they just think about the person in the professional capacity. This is the chief human resource officer. This is the CFO. This is the CTO, right? But when the CFO goes home, I'm guessing her husband doesn't call her CFO, right? I mean, she has a name, and her kids don't call her CFO; they call her mom.
Right.
So you got to remember again. Yes, she has personal desires. Sorry, professional desires. She's got to reduce, CFO, right? She's going to reduce cost, and she's going to be you're going to be looking at that. And if you're selling into the organization, you have to address those. Now, some of those professional, goals probably line up very well with the company,
Hmm.
but she may have other professional goals. Maybe she wants to be the CEO. Maybe she doesn't want to be at that company anymore. Maybe she wants to do something else. Maybe she wants to be perceived in her community as an innovator, right? Maybe she's very risk adverse, right? So you have to remember she has professional goals, and then she has personal life too. Like, again, maybe her personal goal is to get out of the role of CFO. Maybe she wants to be a CEO, or maybe she wants to be a CFO in a different company. So you just got to remember, that you're talking to people, and you have to understand what's the win for the person you're talking to,
Yep.
not just the company, right? The company has their goals, but you also have to think about the person, what's their win, and how, and understand that. And the way you get that is by talking to them as a human being.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I'm sure there are these little tricks that you've learned along the way about how to uncover some of these things, right? You
Yeah.
can't just meet with
Yeah.
someone and just be like, you know what, I think this person wants to save time or save money. You know, maybe it's one or the other, maybe it's both. How do you uncover some of the motives that this person has without being too salesy at the onset pitch?
Yeah, I think, look, I think there's a skill that you can learn. I mean, first,
Mm,
I think the good news is you can learn, most people can learn most of the skills required to be successful in B2B or enterprise sales, I believe. Now, you tell me, hey, Mark, I don't really like people. I prefer to be in the corner by myself. Okay, fine. Then maybe I would say this isn't the career for you. But I think that this is like you can learn accounting, like you
mhm.
can learn to be a blacksmith, like you can learn, I believe, to be an enterprise salesperson, right? If you're willing to, and you can learn the skills. So I think that's the good news, right?
Yep.
One of those skills is active listening. Okay. So it sounds easy. Ask most people, and they say, "Yeah, I'm a good listener," right? But most of us either do. We're either listening and we're waiting to speak, which is quite popular, right? And I'm guilty of it too, because I have a really good point. And Will, you haven't heard my point. My point is so insightful, right? And I know you have a point, but my point is really good, dude. And so, so I'm waiting. So we do that a lot. Everybody's guilty of it. Um,
Sounds like my marriage a little bit.
Right. I was gonna say my wife will tell you I'm very guilty of that, right? My wife's not gonna watch this, right?
You know, we can
So
edit that part out.
yeah, right. So there's people listen and then the other one is you think it's a good one. This is the one I do with my wife, right? Which is
Yeah.
listen to solve, right? And we think that's a good thing. It might be, but if you're talking to a customer, um, and you're listening to solve, then it's still focused on you. And so some of this is the old store kind of selling, Mr. Customer, Ms. Customer, tell me what's going on. And you're listening and you've got your little sales bag here and you're thinking about all the products you have that you can pull out and sort of slot in to solve their problem.
Yep.
But I would argue listening to solve to me is still to me focused. What we try to do is, listening to understand, right? So what's the real issue here? And some of that is pretty straightforward. And some of that you have to sort of read between the lines, right? Is this person looking for an opportunity? Do they view
Mhm.
this solution as being able to create an opportunity? Is there risk? What are you hearing? What are they not saying, right? And so listening and understand is really focused on the other person and is really about trying to understand what their issues are, right? And it's very much focused on the other person and not focused on you. And once you sort of listen to understand, then you can sort of process and figure out, okay, this is what we can do and this is what we can help. But I think to me that's a big skill to learn. That's hard.
No, that's such a great point because a lot of sales folks, when they first get into sales, and I was guilty of this also when I first started, is I felt like I had all the answers right away,
Sure.
right? Like you're the guy with the product. You're supposed to have the
Right.
answers.
Right.
But you never a good salesperson knows they're going to that first meeting to get those answers, to get that clarity. You go and meet a prospect for the first time, you don't know anything about what that person wants or needs. You have to ask those really important qualifying questions to really get the data to actually make the right pitch, or else the pitch that you had in your head could be completely
Sure.
off and miss the mark, right?
Right. I will. Okay. So yeah. So let me give you two sort of things that seem contradictory but not. So I just told you
Yep.
about the value of active listening. It's
Yep.
huge. But I also think you have to bring a point of view.
Hmm.
Okay. So the first meeting I know it's really hard for a lot of entrepreneurs who are thinking, wow, the first meeting is really hard to get. It is. I would argue the second meeting is almost harder to get
Mm,
because the first meeting, it's okay. So if you have a bigger brand name, it's easier. If you're a small company, they're like, who? But maybe you can get in through an introduction, or maybe you're just
right.
working your tail off and you get in.
That's like the benefit of the doubt meeting sometimes, right?
Right, right. I'll give you a meeting or whatever, right?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, but then that meeting, not only you have to actively listening and understand, I would argue you should also come with a point of view beyond just because if you just come and show up and throw up the old and say this is my product.
Right.
First of all, the person's saying, well, you're getting so late in the sales cycle nowadays because all that information is available online, or I've already talked to 3 of your customers or whatever. So I'm not sure that's adding a lot of value. And the second thing, even if it does add value, what are you going to do in the next meeting? right? And so, yeah, you came, you showed me your product. Well, now I really want to talk about my product. No, like, what are you adding value? So can you come and tell me, hey, look, you're in this industry. I've got 5 other customers who are in this industry, or I've had 5 other meetings in this, and even if they're not customers, this is what I'm hearing. How does that resonate with you?
Mm,
Right. I think it's that way you're actually bringing value to the people you're having the meeting with.
right.
And they're like, I'm going to take another meeting with Will because, I learned something last time.
Right.
Right. So those are, the active listening, but also I feel like you got to bring something. You have to come with a point of view. And sometimes a point of view could be, hey, you guys need to move a little faster here, Mr. or Miss potential customer.
Hmm.
And, you can push a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I think that's a
Yeah.
great point, right? A lot of times I would leave a meeting
Yeah.
and we would say, "Oh, that meeting went well."
Right.
And then I think you would challenge us and you'd say, "Well, do you have the next meeting set? What's the next
Right.
action item?" And we would kind
Right.
of look at each other and be like, well, we're going to follow up in a few days and we're going to ask. And I think they're going to reply. And then we're going
Right.
to,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, again, we were rookie salespeople. What do you do at the end? There are these call to actions, right? At
Yeah.
the end of every call that you're supposed to do or supposed to say, like, you need to leave each meeting with a agreed upon next step, right? How do you set that in place? Like, what's a good way for salespeople to go about that?
Well, let me answer it this way.
Yeah.
I think about a sales cycle like I think about other problems. I start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is thanks to McKinsey training. I don't think I was a great consultant. I think I was better salesperson and better than some other jobs. But I'll tell you one thing that they taught me and I stuck with me and they're
Mhm.
really good at it is starting with the end in mind, right? They would go in the first day of the study and say, okay, we think this is the answer. So hypothesis driven, then starting with the end in mind. And so I would say, start with the end in mind. So I want to sell, this solution to this customer. How does that customer buy?
Mhm.
Right. So it's different if it's a $50, you know, $50 solution versus a $500,000 solution, right? But
Mhm.
I would understand, like, hey, how does this customer buy? Who approves it? Who's signing the paper, right? Who needs to approve? Is it legal? Is it procurement? And I would understand. I would sort of picture signing the contract. And then I kind of picture, like, what are all the steps that have to happen before that? Because for me, it's easier to think backwards than it is to sort of project out, right? So I think, okay, I sign this. What has to happen? Well, he needs to sign it and she needs to approve and she needs to approve. Okay, what does he need in order to sign it? Well, he needs these 2 people to say yes. And what does she need to sign it? Well, you approve. Well, she needs this and this, it's a POC or it has to go through procurement or, the legal contract. Well, how long
Right.
does that take? Well, that takes
Right.
2 weeks. Okay, well, then when do we need to get them a legal contract? We need to get them the contract by this date. Well, how long does it take us to get a legal contract? Well, it takes us a month. Okay, so that's 6 weeks out, right? So, I would back into it. And so coming out of that meeting, you ask, well, like, what do I want coming out of that meeting? I back into it and say, okay, where do I need to be next? Right.
Mhm.
But I do, I do think you should have a goal for the meeting. I just sort of would get there backwards if I could.
Right. Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. You kind of got to reverse engineer the process, right?
That works easier for me. I
Yeah.
have a harder time working forward, but
Yeah. No, totally agree. And a lot of times, you'll spend months on a prospect and then you'll realize if
yeah,
you're inexperienced and green like I was, that they're not the ultimate decision maker.
right.
You
Right.
get on
Yeah.
calls, you get on emails, and then you think you're talking to someone that's actually going to sign the check and actually make the decision.
Yeah.
And then you realize that no, they have actually 2 other people that
Right.
they need to get this signed off on. How do you eliminate that pain early on? Do you just,
It's tough, right?
yeah, you
Well,
just
it's
do it?
tough
You
for a couple
outwardly
of
ask? Yep.
well, it's tough for a couple of reasons, right? One is you may know they're not the ultimate decision maker, but you're not getting to the decision, especially if you're a small company, right?
Right.
You're like, hey,
You're a
I'm Will down,
startup.
right?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Will down here in Miami. I'd like to get to the CFO.
Right.
No,
Yeah,
right? No,
exactly. I've
right,
had that
right,
exact
right,
response.
right.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, and some of that I get, right? If
Yeah,
somebody
of
calls me up
course.
and says, hey, Mark, let me talk to your boss's boss. Be like, well, wait a minute,
Yeah. No, your
okay, oh,
that
right,
employee's reputation is on the line and want to make sure
sure,
that they're not wasting their boss's time with a
right.
prospect that might not make
Or,
sense.
or and again, this is where you have to sort of understand what that person's motivations are, right? Maybe
Right.
they're 25 years old and they're really trying to go up the chain, and so they want to be perceived, and they view it as opportunity. Maybe they're mid-career, mid-thing. They got a mortgage, 2 kids in private school, and they're like, but you know what? My boss's boss doesn't know me. That's
Right.
okay,
Right.
right? I'm sitting here. I get my paycheck. Everything's good. So Yeah, but I mean, I think you have to recognize the fact you have a risk, right? If you're
Hmm.
not talking to the decision maker. Now, you can try to mitigate that risk. You may or may not be able to, right? So one is if you know that you may not again, if it's $1,000, $5,000, you may not need to talk to that person. But if it's
Yep.
100,000, 200, you're probably going to have to talk to the person to decide. So you have to figure out how do you get there. So for instance, if you're talking to the director and you're trying to get to the VP, right? And the director asks you for something and says, hey, I need you to do a proof of concept. We need to make sure this thing works, 2 weeks. You can say, okay, first of all, I would spell out the conditions of the I hate proof of concepts, right? But spell the conditions of the proof of concept and say, hey, if this goes well, we're going to agree to A, B, and C. I'm going to show you that our software can do A, B, and C. If it
Hmm.
does A, B, and C, I need you to get me a meeting with the VP in which we can talk about the terms and conditions, everything.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can ask for it right beforehand. And then if they say no, I'm not going to do that, then you have to understand why. Is it because they don't believe in your software? Are you just like, are they just checking the box because they've got somebody else in there? Or
Yep.
do they not have enough, influence to even get you that meeting? Therefore, you're kind of spinning your wheels. But I think it's okay to sort of push that, right? And ask. Um,
Yeah.
but it's hard, especially if you're an early stage company.
Definitely. You have to build up that credibility, and you don't come equipped into any meeting with that credibility when you're a startup. You're kind of in
You
pitch
have
mode
to
right
earn
away.
it. You have to
Yep.
earn it a lot of times, right? Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Curious on, throughout your sales career, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned that you teach others when you meet with young folks and you meet with startups and you're like, this is an adage that served me really, really well. What are some of those lessons and things that you
Well, I
hold
mean,
dear?
I think back to, you mentioned the sort of LiveNinja days.
Yeah.
I remember I would come in I'd come in and we'd sit on the couch there,
Yep.
and you guys would sort of throw your deals up in the CRM, and that was fun for me. I
Yeah.
don't think it was fun for you and Miles, but you
No, because we'd always miss the mark.
um, but I mean, the interesting thing. So it's about a process, right? You guys had
Yeah.
deals. It's not that
Yeah.
you didn't have deals. You had a bunch of deals,
Yeah, we did. We had
right?
flow.
But
Yep.
you had a bunch of. But then I asked, okay, well, what's going to close this month? Or what's going to close this quarter, right? And what's the process? And so, the forecasting process, right? So the
Right.
first thought is enterprise sales to me is all about a process, right? And I say this is the first thing I will ever tell you. And it sounds kind of like boring because if you don't know sales, you think it's a bunch of guys playing golf and drinking beer. No, it's all about a process, right? And you want it to be about a process because you want it to be repeatable,
Hmm.
right? And I assume you want to sell your solution more than one time, right? And you want it to be scalable and you want it to be predictable, and your investors certainly want to, so I think you need a process. So we talked about a forecast process. Okay, so we look at our deals, we understand which deals are going to close, we understand, and then you sort of poke your fingers at each deal. What's when's it going to close, how much, what's going to keep it, what's the next step, right? So all those processes, you can do a pipeline, same thing with your pipeline, right? So the first thing I would tell somebody is, think about it, the process that you're embarking on here. And if you don't have a process, then let's start the conversation there.
Yeah, it's all about process. If you don't have a process with enterprise sales, you're screwed kind of from day one, right?
It makes it sound more boring, right? Because you think
Yeah.
it's like, but
No, you
um,
need it, right? Because there are so many levels to this. There are leads, and you have all this deal flow that you're excited about, but then you got to qualify them. You got to even see which customers are
yeah,
worth your time, which are worth your Salesforce's time, right?
which I think is a real, especially again going back to early stage
Yeah,
companies. I know money is always tight, but time to me is that you're tighter, right? So you're spending time on a deal that's poorly qualified, somebody
right.
who's not going to buy, either because maybe you're talking to somebody who's too junior, they don't have the budget, or in some of these companies, they're taking a meeting with you is great. I mean, they can sort of justify their existence in some ways, right? So it's
Sure.
not, they're going to be there, they're going to get their check, whether they take the meeting with you or not. And if they do take the meeting with you, they can say, hey, I had a meeting with a really cool young company. Whereas you take that meeting that's not going anywhere, and there's 10 things that there's, other customers you couldn't talk to, or you didn't meet with a product team, or you didn't, so there's a cost, right? And you got to think about that. And that's where, again, the whole deal qualification would come in.
Yeah, I can't think of another domino effect that could hurt a sales force and as a result a company more by just wasting time on unqualified deals, because what
Yeah.
happens is you end up wasting all this resource and energy.
Yeah.
You end up chasing deals that will ultimately always fail. The morale of the team sinks, and
Sure.
then you have to report to your investors and to your board and everybody else,
Yeah.
we keep missing on these deals, and there's a bunch of red flags there. And
Yeah.
as an investor who I'm one portfolio company of 20 or 30, they don't
Yeah.
have time to kind of dig through it if this was a really qualified deal or not. All they know is we
Sure.
keep missing forecasts. We keep, missing deals. And it really goes back to what you said, not having a process, not qualifying them, and not,
Yep.
sticking to that. So I think that's absolutely key. And that initial part of the funnel, the qualification and making sure that they're, you're talking to the right people. Yeah, I think it all starts with that, right?
But again, that's a skill. Nobody comes,
No,
nobody's born knowing how to qualify deals. Maybe some
correct.
people pick it up, but again,
Right.
that's something you can learn,
Yes.
right? And again, this one of my jobs was running a sales academy, and now I coach salespeople. And what I'm passionate about is, I told you I had 3 days of sales training, right?
Hmm.
And if you talk to a lot of salespeople, well, how did you start? Well, I had half an hour, or I had a week or something. It's crazy, right?
Yep.
Because if my accountant, right, he's got an undergraduate degree, I think he's got a master's degree, he's got a CPA. Like, I'm not going to hand you my receipts and say, hey, Will, would you file for me? And maybe after 3 or 4 years, the IRS will stop harassing us, right? It's great. A carpenter, you have to be an apprentice, you're a journeyman, then you're a master carpenter. But you want to be a salesperson. In a lot of organizations, well, why are you the salesperson? Well, because I'm the salesperson.
Right.
It's crazy. It's a profession. It can be learned, I believe, and there's certain skill set that can be learned, that can be taught, and that should, and that companies, smart companies, I believe, are investing in it.
No, it's such a great point. And on that, I think this is a great segue into this next question. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see, junior salespeople make, or people that are just getting started in sales, that often, it's one of the things that you step in and you correct right away? What are some of those top mistakes?
Yeah, I think. So let me answer it this way. I'm
Yeah.
taking a leadership class right now online for my business school alumni. They offered a alumni thing, and so I take that. And one of the exercises was draw a capital E on your forehead. Okay, so I did it, and hold on a second. I did it like this.
Uh-huh.
Okay, okay, that's the way. That's inward fight. That's an E to me. That's not an E to you,
Mm.
right? And so the first thing they said is, how did you draw your E? And I said, oh crap, I draw it inward face. I'm such a
Uh-huh.
bad person, right? But I'm not a bad person. But I'm inward focused because
Right.
I drew the E inward facing, but I should
Okay.
draw the E outward facing, right?
Mm.
And so I think what I like, if I'm talking to younger salespeople or younger professionals in general, again, it's not about you. It's about your customer. I really believe that if you take care of your customer, so everything else follows, right? So focus on what their needs are, focus on what they are. So don't go in and just say, and this goes in the corollary here, is don't talk feature function, right? Just don't go in and say, well, my product does this, my product does that, my product.
Mhm.
Nobody cares. The only thing people care about is what your product can do for them. What's the output, right? And I always say, for instance, if somebody comes along and says, here's the new Boeing airplane, it's carbonite and it's this, and I don't care. Can it get me to San Francisco faster? I got an hour more for meetings, and I get back to my family an hour earlier, right? But if the guy's trying to sell me on the flight and say, well, it's got carbonite,
Right.
why do I care, right? I
Right.
mean, and so it's not about the plane, it's about what it does for me, right? And whatever solution you're discussing, it's not about the version of JavaScript. Are people still using JavaScript? So it's not about that, right? It's about what it can do for that person or that organization, and more importantly, that person. And I think that's the click that needs to happen.
That goes back to value-based sales, right? That's the whole concept behind value-based.
Well, yeah, but for whom?
Right.
Right?
Correct.
For whom? Right?
Absolutely.
For
For
whom
the
is the
for the
value?
end
Right? Right?
customer.
Right? 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 So this is the value, right? I'm selling the value to you of implementing this solution, and this is the value to the company, and this is the value to you, and it's a Venn diagram, but
Right.
there can be some things that are in it for, if you go to the head of accounting and you say, hey, I can cut 60% of the accounting costs, and he's thinking, well, I hired all the people in the account, I've been to their weddings and their
Yep.
everything, I don't want to cut 60% of the cost in the account, right? So it's value, but you want to position like what's in it for the person. Well, I can reduce the spend here in the accounting, and then you're going to be able to take your accounting folks and make them really value add, and you're going to get a seat at the table with the CFO. You're not just going to be the folks cutting costs. You're going to be the folks bringing new ideas and being innovative, and oh, okay, now I'm interested, right?
Yeah.
So it's good for
Yeah.
the company and it's good for the person. That's the value, right?
Absolutely. I think, like, even from smaller software sales, like, I use a email app called Superhuman.
Okay.
And typically, email apps, that 99% of email apps are free. You could download Gmail for
Sure.
free. You could download, all these different clients. It comes with your Mac. It comes with your iPhone. Superhuman costs $30 a month. And how did they get
Wow.
me to pay $30 a month? So
Yeah, I want to meet that sales guy.
over $300 a year for something that my other apps do. Effectively, it does, but they've shown me a way that I'm getting back hours per week by
Right.
using this. They label it as the fastest email experience on the
Okay.
market. And once they
Right.
teach you how to use it, which there's a training involved, you realize
Gotcha.
just how fast now you can get through your inbox with the, with the learnings there. That to me is what you're exactly what you're talking about. It's value
Yeah.
based. It gives me my time back.
Right. More hours with your wife and your kids
Yep.
for $360 a year.
Yes, I can
Done.
justify
I mean,
that. Correct.
Done. We're not even talking price.
Right. Exactly. But if I'm comparing Gmail to this, at the end of the day,
Right.
without that value add or that
Right.
positioning, I'm never
Right.
going to make that transition.
Right. Or if they tell you what the infrastructure layer is. Or
Correct.
something.
Exactly. We
Right.
built it
Right.
on the
Right.
latest tech.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's
Right.
not
Who
going to
cares?
fly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So another challenge that I see sales teams go through is they nail a market, right? And they feel like they've cornered that segment of the market. But then, of course, especially if they have investors and they need to scale,
Sure.
it's time to go upstream or to go into different markets, different
Sure.
countries or different, segments. How would you advise companies and sales forces on how to do that properly? Because sometimes you can get a little bit of ahead of yourself, and
Sure.
it goes back to what we were talking before, not being a part of the process, and then things start to spiral. So what advice do you give when it comes to going into new markets?
Yes. Look, I'll give you an example from early in my career, right?
Yeah.
My first sales job, I told you I had the southern cone of Latin America and
Right.
so essentially Chile and Argentina. And I sold a few deals, right?
Yep.
And the other guys didn't. And so they came to me and they said, well, you've got all of Latin America now to sell,
Yep.
right? And you think, wow, that's great. But I was one guy
Right.
based in Buenos Aires, one person. And so I had to essentially do this, like, okay, where do I focus, right?
Yep.
So I looked at my skills. I spoke Spanish, spoke English, didn't speak Portuguese. I mean, you know how it is, Portuñol. You can sort of, but
Sure.
no. I mean, I did. I looked at the product. The product works really well in Chile. The Chilean market's like the Peruvian market. The Peruvian market in this it was pension funds.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the Mexican market, and they're kind of like the Argentine and the Uruguayan market. Okay, so I looked at that. We got really good use cases here, got good functionality. The software works, everything works here. We can add value. So I went to my boss and I said, not going to sell in the biggest country in Latin America, right? And from the outside, you're like, you're nuts. I mean, it's Brazil, right?
Yeah, here's a big opportunity for you. Go
Yeah,
after it.
yeah. But the way I evaluated that is I said, well, look, it's not a good use of my time. I could go there. I could, oh, I'm selling in Brazil. It's great. We're in Brazil. I have all these meetings. I'm sure I could have gotten a bunch of meetings because what's funnier than an American trying to speak Portuñol, right? I mean, so that's how I would think about it, right? So everything's opportunity cost, especially at early stage company, right? It's all about opportunity. So what else?
Yep.
So I would start thinking about, okay, that's one way to think about it. The other metric I would sort of take in is, again, what's your goal? Right? So if your investors come to you and say, you got to sell in you're selling market A, and now you got to sell in market B. Okay, good. Let's have a conversation. Mr. or Miss Investor, what is it that you want me to do? Well, we want you to triple your revenue. Okay. So do you care if I triple my revenue by selling in market B, or if I just get one of my customers to pay me a lot? No, I don't care how you do it. Okay. So the issue is not you want me to go into market B. The issue is you want me to triple my revenue. Or the conversation could go, we want you to sell in market B. Why? Do you want me? No, it's not a revenue issue. We just, we think there's an opportunity here. We think in order to grow the company, we want to show that the company is not just pigeonholed into here,
Right.
or there's another company could move in. We want to sort of box them out. Okay. So your goal is just for me to get as many sales and to corner as much of the market in market B as I can, right? You're not too concerned about profitability. You're right. Okay, good. Because those are two separate scenarios. So just, hey, you got to go sell into market B, to me is not enough information for me to figure out what's the end goal. What are we trying to do here? And then I can back into it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Oftentimes investors, again, it goes back to they're dealing with so many different companies. Sometimes they'll tell you, we want you obviously to go to new markets because obviously that in their minds is just we want you to increase sales. Sometimes you end up going into other markets and you're just screaming into the void.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
There's nobody there to hear the pitch because it's not an effective pitch for that market. When really what you should be doing is going and doubling down on maybe what was working. Like you said, maybe there's upsell opportunities
Right.
and things like that.
So sometimes it's hard to say no, right?
Right.
In a
Of
lot of
course.
things, you don't want to just go and say nope, not going to do it to an investor, because then
Yep.
okay. So here's another thing. You asked me what's a good thing for salespeople to do. Anybody,
Right.
open-ended questions,
Right.
not yes no questions. So I would say, great, I understand you want me to sell into market B. Can you help me understand what we're trying to accomplish here? Well, we want to sell more. Okay, imagine that we would sell more. Imagine we're at the end of the year and we had accomplished your goal, Mr. or Miss Investor. What would that look like to you? And sort of get them to say, well, then we'd have triple the revenue. You say, okay. So, and again, okay, so what so if we had triple the revenue at the end of the year, that would be a success to you. Yeah, that would be a success for me. Okay, here's where I think we can actually get more revenue. It's not market B, it's market C. And here's my plan to get there. See, that's not just telling somebody no, at which point you sort of set up a confrontation because,
Yeah.
I know where this. So again, open-ended questions are great. Understand what the end goal is. And then if you have a different way to getting there, propose that instead of just saying no, especially to, somebody who might think a lot of themselves.
Yeah, definitely. Like board members for sure. So on that note, and this ties into that topic because you need to expand your sales, you need to grow, right? Oftentimes companies scale, you go
Mhm.
from one or two people and it's time to really build out the sales force, right? You need to get a
Yeah,
VP of sales. You need to
right.
build out, sometimes a stack where you have SDRs,
Yep.
sales development representatives, and then to account execs that have quotas. How do you think about, and like, as you coach other companies and advise other companies about really for the first time making that transition into startup mode where I roll up my sleeves and I do everything, but now I got to build out a full-on sales force that's an organized part of the organization.
Yeah. Again, okay. So some of this is not going to be new. It's, it's the first, let me tell you the mistake I think I see, because,
Yeah.
and maybe this is the next question, but the mistake look, I've spent 20 plus years in the software industry and I don't know how to code, right? I took one computer science class and I dropped it after 3 weeks because I was trying to get a math credit. And after 3 weeks, I said, screw it, I'll take calculus, right? And I was 3 hours in the same, anyway, so I don't know about coding. I mean, I can go front end developer, back end. Okay, fine. But if you come to me with a coding problem, I'm gonna say, well, hire a developer.
Right.
It's a black box. It has developer on it, and I'm going to put that on the problem, and the problem's going to be solved. Now you're looking at me, you're like, no, Mark, is it a front end developer, back end developer? Is he better at new products versus patching? Is it blah blah blah? Is he
Right.
efficient coding? So you see the nuance. Okay, so what I see from the other side is somebody said, well, we just need a salesperson, right? And so there's an Argentine phrase, I think, cualquier colectivo me deje bien. 80 bus will take me where I'm going, right? No, it won't, right? Because if you, and that was a terrible accent, but if you're trying to get to Atlanta and you hop on the Metro Dade bus, you're not going to get there, right? So again, so you say, well, we got to build out the sales force. So we got to hire a salesperson. Well, okay, let's back up. What are we trying to do? We need more leads. Okay, we need more leads. We don't need a VP of sales for more leads. I mean, I was, I was helping advise the Tigray asked me for help with another company, and we ended up hiring 2 folks out of FIU, right out of their sales program, like brand new. I mean, hungry, which is great about
SDRs,
FIU.
right?
Yeah, as SDRs, right out of FIU. The sales program, which is a wonderful program. FIU, I'm a super long FIU. Love the institution. Hired a bunch of people out of there, about 20.
And
And
for
I think
folks that
they're
are listening,
great.
just a quick clarification: an SDR is somebody who, at the top of the funnel, their
Right.
job is to get leads and to
That's
ask
right.
them qualifying questions before handing them over to a quota carrying account executive.
Right.
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 Yeah.
And in this case, it was kind of like an SDR. It was more like somebody who was trying to sign people up and there's no revenue up front,
Right.
and the revenue came over. It is similar, but what they need to do is make a lot of calls for a
Yep.
low ticket item. And so if you were to come to me and say, well, we just need more sales, we need to hire salespeople. Well, we can solve this in a different way, right? And so, so what are you trying to do? No, what we need to do. In this case, these 2 young folks out of FIU were perfect. Now, if you said to me, Mark, we've got these enterprise customers, we're halfway in the deal cycle, and the deal's sort of stagnating at that director level. We can't get in the VP. We know we got to get up there to really make things happen. We've got a few users in IT, but we're trying to do an enterprise deal. Should I hire, 2 22-year-old kids out of FIU? No, that's not the right, then I would say, well, maybe you get somebody who's done it before in a corporate environment. So the way I would think about it is, not every bus leaves you where you want to go.
Right.
Right. And so what are you trying to solve? And I know it sounds the same. I always think, what's the problem I'm trying to solve?
Yep.
Right. And so, and I think sometimes, again, the technical early stage guys are just like, we need a sales guy. Boom. Which is what I would say if you told me to develop a product. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Hire,
It's almost like a general blanket statement. Right.
Right. Boom. And then they pay a lot of money. It takes a
Yep.
lot of time, and then the person, it doesn't work out. So
Correct. No, that's great. Great advice. So on that note, what do you typically look for when you're hiring sales talent? Are you looking for, like you said, I mean, we had great results also.
yeah,
Again, nod to FIU. FIU grads are amazing. It's part of the work ethic, I think, of that
it is
university and the people that go
absolutely.
there. But what do you typically look for when you're looking for sales talent? And I know that's different. A VP of sales and an
Sure.
SDR, two different skills. But
Yeah.
are there some overarching qualities that you typically look for?
Yeah, look, I think coachability and adaptability are huge, right? Especially coachability. And so what does that mean? What I mean is the ability to take new information and change your behavior, right? So for instance, if you came in and I want to interview you and I say, hey, Will, a little bit about what our company does, pitch me, for 3 minutes. And they pitch, and it's not gonna be great. That's fine. They're not in the
Right.
company. But then I say, tweak it a little bit. I say, focus less here, focus a little more here. Don't say this, say that. Pitch me again. If they don't change the pitch at
Right.
all after my input, again, they don't have to be perfect, but I want to see, are you going to take input and change? And there's some people are coachable and some people are less coachable, right? So I want to see coachability. I want to see adaptability. I want to see the ability to process information, to take in a lot of information, figure out what's important, figure out what's not important, figure out how everything comes together. Obviously, a good ability to communicate,
Yep.
right? Or at least the kernel, the ability. I don't expect to put you in front of the CFO on day one, but do you have that general ability to creativity, ability to influence without power is a big one. And then there might be something specific, right? If you need somebody who has experience, if you're selling into the oil and gas industry and you're selling, environmental health and safety manager, an oil and gas company, then yeah, you're going to want some environment, some oil and gas experience probably. So there's things like that you could look for as well, if it's more of a technical sale. But I think in general, especially with the more junior roles, and then for the sales manager, I definitely want somebody who can coach, who can influence people, who can mentor, who can manage, and who knows when to use different tools, right? And so the sales manager role to me is about getting leverage. It can't be a super AE, right? If I have a sales manager and an account executive, I'm sitting both into the meeting and they're doing the same thing, then why am I paying for two, right? So I want a manager who I think can get the best out of the sales team. So puts that process in place, is able to coach people, is able to grow people, is able to motivate people, things like that.
No, I think that makes sense. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier. Coachability and active listening probably tie hand in hand, right? Because you
They
can't be
do.
coachable if you're not listening to what is someone's trying to tell you, right? So that's a key indicator right off the bat.
That's a great connection. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So real quick, the last thing before we wrap up, I wanted to get your thoughts on all the craziness that's happening here in the Miami tech scene, because you're a long time Miami
Yeah.
guy. The last 90 days feels like it's completely transformed this region, at least from a optics and momentum perspective
Yeah,
on what's
yeah,
happening. I see
yeah.
a lot of obviously some incredible announcements that have substance, but what are your thoughts in seeing all this stuff that's happening, based on all the previously everything that's happened?
Yeah, I mean, so it's crazy, right? So
Yeah.
Twitter is crazy.
Yeah.
The chats that you're in, that I'm in,
Right.
it was WhatsApp. Then they got too big, so now we're in Telegram. So that's crazy. I mean, I've got it on mute, right? I mean,
Right, of
but so
course.
that's crazy. Look, net, I'm positive on it,
Yep.
right? I'm positive. I think it's good. Now, so I think it's good. I think the long-term effects are going to be good, right? Uh, now, look, we Floridians are very ignorant of our history, and newcomers even less so. But I'm reading a great book right now about the land boom in Florida in the
Mhm.
20s, right? So one thing you remember is nothing is new. So
Right.
Florida and Miami do boom and bust really well, right? So if the
Mhm.
business cycle is sort of like this, we kind of compress it a little bit. So there's a little bit of a boom to it, and that's fine. I think, look, if 100 people move here and 30 stay, that's a net positive,
100%.
right?
Yep.
So that's a net positive. So I think it's all good. Here's what I'd like, right? A couple things, right? And one is I want to get beyond on the why Miami. I want to get beyond weather and taxes. They don't seem like very wide moats to me, right? So it's fine if weather and taxes are 3 and 4. Okay, fine. But other places have nice weather, and I'd argue a lot of these people haven't been through June, July, August, and September
Right,
yet.
exactly.
But we were going back and forth on this on Twitter earlier
Yeah.
today. So okay, so weather, but a lot of places have a lot, and the taxes can be kind of a race to the bottom, right? Because it's who's to say these people aren't going to adjust their taxes? So that's fine, but 3 and 4. But how about how about number 2 is something like, obviously we're linked to Latin America, but
Yes.
why aren't we a link to the Americas? In Blue Lagoon, there's a bunch of companies, Latin American headquarters, fine. But I drove by one, Schenker, which is a German logistics company, and it said America's headquarters. I thought that's pretty cool, because here's a European company, and they said, well, I can be in the United States and have a link to all the United States and to Latin America. So why can't we so that to me seems like a why Miami? Why Miami? Well, European, African, Asian, you could have your America's headquarters here. Latin America, sure, but also America. So that seems like a good why Miami.
Yep.
The other one I like is around resilience. People push back, and a lot of people saying we don't need it. Okay, fine. I've been wrong before, and I may be wrong this one. But the other one is maybe resilience, climate change, nature, anything like that. So you got paddle. Andres Avello is doing the
Yeah, sure.
PADL. Those guys are good. I went out with them a few weeks ago. That's a cool idea. It's a paddle board, on-demand paddle board, and I think you can expand into other things. You got ecosystems, the two brothers who are doing that
Yeah,
around.
Lemondins, yep.
Right, and so I think there's things that, hey, you can test this in our backyard. Literally, you can test this in the backyard. So in Morningside Park, I'm on the board of the Nature Conservancy. We're doing some work with the city of Miami about, how do you design green-gray infrastructure? There's a whole neat things you can do there, with sensors and stuff. So that seems to me like it should be maybe in the why Miami. So,
sure.
I want the tech sector to grow. I was a Florida expat, right? I want to get more Florida expats back,
Yep.
right? I got these emails from my mom when I was gone for 19 years. Why don't you come back for this job? And you look at it and you're like, Mom, God bless you, but I'm not going to go work at the Apple store, right?
Right.
And so, bless her heart, she was trying to get me back with anything tech related, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so I want, and I think it will help curve out if it's not just people moving here in tourism, if we can get tech, then we can curve out next time there's a boom and bust, we can sort of flatten that out with having another sector. So I'm long. I want to make sure, I hope these folks get engaged, right? Get engaged with FIU, get engaged with, get on nonprofit boards, give back. Anyway, I'm long, and we'll see. But I also, read Florida history. It's fascinating.
Yes, and let's hope that we don't repeat ourselves in a lot of these things, right? No, I'm with you. I think this is mainly a net positive. There are things that are going to come with the territory,
Sure.
and I'm sure some folks will point at the things that are negative, and we'll continue to focus on that. But I think, like you said, if some remnants, like of people that come and they leave some good things here,
Right.
and some
Right.
people stay, I think that's just going to benefit, not just the now, but also future generations here in this community.
Right. And I think that we're so much to learn. I mean, some of these people have amazing backgrounds. I hope they get plugged in and they're helping, companies grow, young companies grow. I hope they're mentoring people.
Yes.
I hope they're getting engaged with Startup FIU. I hope they're teaching. I teach at FIU. I hope they're teaching at FIU. I hope they're getting on boards, because we could certainly benefit from their experience.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I told you, 5 miles from my mother-in-law, so I'm here.
Yeah,
You and me,
you're
well,
locked
man.
in.
Yeah, you too, right? So we're not going anywhere.
That's right. All right, cool, man. Well, Mark, where can folks find you if they want to get in touch? LinkedIn, Twitter, what's the best spot?
They can find me on LinkedIn. It's Mark Crofton. They can find me on Twitter at Mark Crofton. Yeah, either one of those places is fine.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm happy to help.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, Mark is one of the most brilliant sales guys I know. Again, we had the pleasure of working together at LiveNinja. So for folks that are listening that want to talk to Mark, I encourage you to do so, because just an amazing guy who kind of,
Thanks,
simplifies the complex process of sales. And every time I speak with you, I learn something new. So I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Will. That's very kind. That's very kind. I appreciate it.
All right, appreciate it. We'll drop all of Mark's contact information in the description for you to reach out. And Mark, thank you for joining us, man.
Hey, all right. Thank you. Take it easy.